Good morning. It's good to see you all on this last week of classes, a very busy time in the semester. While our formal gatherings conclude for the semester with this morning's last lecture, Sacred Hour indeed continues every Wednesday of the year. As you might have read from Becky Welch in this morning's SNC News, a variety of ways of observing Sacred Hour can help us become, in her words, more centered and more mindful of what is most important in life. And so in these many weeks stretching from today until we resume our common gatherings on January 25th, I encourage you to take some moments for your spirit during Sacred Hour. The clamors of your studies, your to-do list, or your Zimbra inbox will certainly remain. But Advent whispers a call to preparation, and our Norbertine community reminds us of the importance of contemplation. And so together may we nudge one another to recall that stillness, prayer, and gratitude yield deeper fulfillment than any task we may relish crossing off our lists. Now on to the business of this morning. I'm pleased to introduce our final last lecturer of the semester. I believe that John Frohliger and I arrived on the St. Norbert campus on the same year, in the fall of 1983. At the time, I was a frosh here, desperately avoiding any math class I could. And John was a fresh face in the mathematics discipline. John has continued on to serve this community not only as in his role as an associate professor, but also with a recent stint as Associate Dean of Natural Sciences. Since I was successful in avoiding John in the classroom, sorry about that, it has been other places that I have glimpsed his graceful wisdom, notably on FLV's retreat seminar on vocation and in his leadership of a common prayer experience a number of years back. These encounters suggested to me that John has much to say to our community, much we can benefit from hearing. So without further delay, let's welcome to the microphone, John Frohliger.
Thank you, Julie, and you're right, it was 1983. Howdy. Okay, this is a college, and people learn things at colleges. They learn about history, literature, psychology, and of course, mathematics. But those lessons are intentional. Students pay tuition and come to class expecting to see and hear new things. And we do our best to provide those lessons. But many important lessons are of the unexpected, not in the book variety. Sometimes as we go through life, we pause, look back, and recognize that without even realizing it at the time, we have been changed by something important that has happened, either in a single instance or over a long period of time. And I'd like to share with you some of the unexpected things I've learned over the years. Okay, this one's not unexpected. One unsurprising thing I've learned is that a task is much easier, much more enjoyable if you are interested in and excited about what you are doing. Okay, for example, I love teaching and mathematics. And in that respect, I think I have my ideal job. I like watching young minds think, discover, and develop. And for me at least, mathematics is such a wonderful subject. It has a crystalline beauty, structured and elegant. Moreover, with its foundation in formal logic, mathematics gives you a way of knowing that is more certain than pretty much any other field. Okay, I like sharing some of the cool, surprising, even counterintuitive results of math. So I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to sprinkle a few of my favorite math properties into my talk. Hey, it's my talk. These properties aren't connected to the unexpected things I've learned. I just find them really interesting and hope you might enjoy them. For instance, okay, I posed this problem in my Math 123 or before that Math 114 class. I say, suppose you have a room full of randomly selected people. What's the probability that two of those people have the same birthday? And by birthday, I just mean month and day, I don't mean year. And after a little pause, they realize it's a bad question. Well, how many people are in the room? Because if you only have two people in the room, chances are very unlikely that they would have the same birthday. But if you have, say, 400 people in the room, let's see, there are only 365, 366 if you're counting leap year, possible birthdays. And so if you have more than 365 people, more than 366, they're guaranteed it. So I changed the question. Okay, how many randomly selected people would you need in a room to have roughly a 50-50 chance that two have the same birthday? Most common answer I get, and there's some reasoning behind it, well, about 365 days, 366 if you count leap year, 50% probability, 50% is 1/2, so 50% of 366 is 183. So a good guess, well, a starting guess, would be 183, but then we go through the math, and they learn that the real answer is 23. If you have 23 randomly selected people, then there's roughly a 50% chance that two have the same birthday. Okay, quick disclosure. I'm assuming that the chances of being born on any one day are the same as chances of being born on any other. I don't think that's quite accurate, but it's close enough. And I'm only using 365 instead of 366 days. That throws things off a little bit, but just a little bit. For all intents and purposes, if you have 23 randomly selected people, two have the same birthday. So like I would bet a month's salary that two of you have the same birthday. Just kidding. Usually in those classes, on the first day of class, I give them a little slip to fill out, putting down information like name, email, and all that. And I also ask them to write down their birthday. And if they don't want to put their actual birthday, I say just make up a date. And then when we get to the probability section, we go through and we talk about the math, and then I pull up the dates. And more often than not always because probability isn't certainty, but more often than not, they, and I'll be honest, I am surprised that two will have the same birthday. Okay, something I've learned. Like most people, when I first meet someone, I usually form a quick impression of them. Over the years, however, I've learned to be cautious about first impressions because frequently my first impressions are wrong. For example, this is many years ago. I was teaching a calculus class, and there was a student in the front of the class who had a constant sneer on his face. I mean, for days, he just sat there scowling, and I kept thinking, well, what's the matter? Did I do something he didn't like? Does he not like this course? And like, what's with the attitude? And then I learned that was his natural expression. He wasn't angry at all. He just had his relaxed facial expression. Okay, that's not the guy. He wasn't being negative toward me or toward calculus. In fact, we got along great. He played basketball, I played basketball, so we would play hoops over at Schultes. When he was a senior and time for him to graduate, I wrote letters of recommendation on behalf. I learned that the problem wasn't with him, it was with me and my need to overcome a faulty first impression. Okay, now, another favorite math fact. There are lots of numbers. I mean, we're talking lots of numbers. Just take the numbers between 0 and 1, things like 1/2 and 2/3 and pi over 10, all of that. Okay, there are more numbers between 0 and 1 than there are atoms. What'd I do? Oh. What if, just a moment. Did I turn the volume up? Okay. Is it? Oh, okay, I'm getting echo here. There are more numbers between 0 and 1 than atoms in the universe. And that, by the way, that even holds true if there happen to be an infinite number of atoms in the universe. Because the number of numbers between 0 and 1 is a bigger infinity. And yes, there is such a thing. I'm not making that up. Kind of a corollary to be careful of your first impressions is realize that the first impressions that you give, or not necessarily first, but the impressions you give may not be the ones you expect to give or that you intend to give. Okay, one of my classes a few years ago, I was out loud debating with myself about how to cover a certain topic. And what I told the students was that I was hemming and hawing, and at the moment, hawing was winning. And one of the students said, "Oh, I got to write that down." I thought she was kidding. But later, I found out that she actually did write down things that Prof said and did. At one point, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked what else she had written down. And according to her notes, once I drew a circle and spent 20 seconds admiring the circle. Okay, I admit that I like to take pride in my drawings, but I didn't expect that to make a good impression, such an impression on a student. By the way, it was a good circle. Another one, this isn't something that came from me, but I guess she heard it from me. There's a term in mathematics called hand waving, and that's where you're not giving a formal proof, you're just giving the idea. So it's like, look, this is how it works. And I used the term, and she thought it was hilarious. And it didn't occur to me that anyone would even think it unusual. In our set theory course, there's a property called the well-ordering principle. And the textbook abbreviates it as WOP. Okay, I will admit every time I get to that, I'm a little uncomfortable because WOP reminds me of what I think is an outdated ethnic slur. But maybe I shouldn't have been so worried because when we got to that, the students were amused because it reminded them of something maybe a little more important to them. I don't know if that's how it's spelled. That's how she spelled it. Oh, and by the way, impressions you make on people don't have to be based on historical fact. Early in my career here, a student came by and said, "Oh, I heard you put your foot through a podium." Okay, my memory is not the greatest, but putting my foot through a podium I think would file under something I would remember. And I didn't. So I had to tell the student that no, I didn't do that, but probably still out there, you know how rumors go on this campus. There may be people who think, "Oh yeah, Dr. Frohliger one time put his foot through a podium." Another math fact. Right now, I can guarantee you that there are two people in the city of Chicago that have exactly the same number of hairs on their head. Don't know who they are, but there is a property, it's called the pigeonhole principle, which guarantees that those people are there. Just something amazing. Okay, one lesson, and I have to say it surprised me, is not being afraid to challenge people. Not only have I taught students, but I've learned some things from them. And one lesson I've gotten from our students is that as long as you're not just assigning busy work, and as long as you're going to help them through the process, many students, maybe even most, will rise to a challenge. Now, let me give you just a few examples that I've encountered. Okay, coming to office hours may not be a big deal to our students, but it would have been to me. When I was an undergraduate, I never went to a prof's office. In fact, I think the only time, maybe the first and only time, was when I was applying to graduate schools and I wanted letters of recommendation. So just off the get-go, I'm impressed that our students, when they have questions, will come and ask them. That's especially true for our math majors. Not trying to single out math as opposed to other fields, but those are the ones I know. If a student in a pre-calculus class comes by and says, "I have a question on this," then I'll say, okay, come in and sit down, and I'll try to guide them through the solution. If students, especially if they come in a group, from one of my advanced classes come in and say, we have a question on this problem, then I sit down and say, okay, go up to the chalkboard. And one of them will go up there and write, and the others will throw in ideas. And my role is to be kind of a coach. I'll ask questions, which I hope will guide them to a solution, occasionally make suggestions, but they're doing the work. If I were an undergraduate and knew that I was going to have to perform going to a prof's office, you would never see me there. But our students do this. Okay, sometimes supplying M&Ms and Reese's Pieces helps, but they come even if I don't have candy. And I am so impressed by that. I am so grateful. Those office hours are easily my favorite part of the job. Another surprise, well, the reaction was a surprise. Back in early 90s, a colleague down in Carthage College told me about an in-house math journal that they had started. They called it Sine on the Dotted Line. That's sine as in sine and cosine. Math humor. And this journal gave students the opportunity to write something mathematically, which is very beneficial. There are many students who can understand the math but can't communicate it. And this gave them the chance to write up their results in a clear, formal, and complete way. I thought this was a wonderful idea. So in 1994, we started our own in-house journal. And it's been going on, I think there was 1 year where I just didn't have the time to do it. But other than that, since 94, we've been publishing them. The students, okay, where do we get our authors? Well, usually it's the students in my spring advanced class, whatever that is. So, anyone taking linear next semester? If you are, we're going to do the journal. And especially early, I expected to get resistance. I expected the student evaluations to say, why are we doing this? Last year, when so-and-so taught it, there was no journal writing. I thought they would object to the challenge. And for the most part, I've been wrong. Over the years, I've had one student, I'm serious, one student I didn't think put in the effort. And on the student evaluations, many students will say, this was the best feature of the class. So that was a chance where, an opportunity for me to give a challenge, and they took it. One I shouldn't be surprised about our math students will go and give talks at regional, including our own student conference, but also at national conferences attended by students and faculty alike. They take their math on the road. And with mentoring and encouragement from the math discipline, they research a topic, prepare a presentation to give to audiences of students, faculties alike. Some students do their research as part of a paid summer experience, an REU, or we have an in-house research program. Others develop a talk from maybe a paper they wrote for our journal, but many of the students do it all from scratch without, for want of a better term, reward. It's not, they don't get a grade for it, they don't get paid for it, they just simply do it. They take the challenge. And by now, I shouldn't be surprised by this display of undergraduate initiative because St. Norbert Math students have been giving talks at regional and national conferences for over 25 years. Still, when I step back to think of it, I can't help but be impressed by the number of times students rise to a challenge. Okay, I've been giving you math facts, a math trick. I saw a TV magician, I think David Copperfield, but I don't know, do this on TV, and I recognized the math behind it. I thought, this is a great trick. So when I have a few extra minutes in, especially lower level classes, I do it. You start with a 3x3 grid like that. And I tell the students, okay, you start in any of the four corners. And then I tell them to move a certain number of moves. Now the rule is you can move horizontally, vertically, not diagonally, but you can go back and forth. You can leave and then enter a square. So if I say move 5 squares, this person can go from here, then down, that's 1, 2 over, 3 back, 4 down, and then 5 over. And then after they move, I magically identify one of the squares that I know they're not in. And say, you're not in this square, and here I'm blacking it out. If it's on chalkboard, I just exit out. And then in the future, I'm going to tell them to move some more, but they can't go through or in one of the blackened squares. All right? And this goes on and on until at the very end, I have blackened all of the squares except the one that they're in. And then, of course, they're made. Give you a sense of it. If you want to play along, fine. If you don't, just humor me for a little bit. So start in any of the 4 corners. Don't tell me. And I have my reading glasses on, so I can't read your eyes. Okay, now move 3 squares. Remember, you can move horizontally, vertically, not diagonally. And you're not there. Okay, so you're not in that corner. Now move 5 squares, but you can't go or in or through that corner. And you're not there. How does he do this? Okay, now move 1 square, but don't go in any of the black ones. And you aren't here. By the way, if at any point you say, yes, I am there, you made a mistake. Okay, now move 4 squares. And you're not there. Getting tight now. Okay, move 2 squares. And you're not in that corner. Okay, now move 3 squares. Typically, the game goes on until we're down to 2 squares, and then I say move, and then they're in 1 square. And they go, wow, how'd you do that? But to save some time, okay, if you're playing along, you're here. Somewhere here up north. Okay, yes, don't be afraid to challenge people. But realize at the end, or something I've learned, is that ultimately we have to be willing to let the people we care about make their own decisions. And as long as those decisions don't hurt themselves or others, we should support them in the paths they choose. With my children, this frequently meant encouraging them in what they want to do, not necessarily what I prefer they do. And here on campus, I've encouraged students who show talent to major in mathematics, or if they're doing well in math, to pursue graduate studies. And I'll continue to do that, to encourage promising students, but I also realize that this decision is theirs and that I should support them no matter what. And I learned this lesson from my parents. They provided guidance, but ultimately they supported us kids in whatever we decided to do. Okay, this is a picture of the Frohliger family. It's about 15 years old. Notice more hair on the head. As you can see, I'm one of 8 children. My siblings and I lead very different lives. Our educational levels range from high school diplomas to postgraduate degrees. One brother was in the Navy, but none of the rest of us joined the military. Employment-wise, we run the gamut from professional careers to hourly jobs. And as far as religion is concerned, we range from Catholic to non-denominational to non-practicing. Some of us have been married once, some more than once, some not at all. Yet despite our varied lifestyles, I never got the impression that my parents favored any one of us more than another. My parents weren't always sure about the decisions we made, but they were always there to support us. Okay, let me give you one personal example. I try not to make this public, but I'm considered tall. And this is not a new condition. Here's an earlier picture of us. I was probably high school. Look, hair. As you can see, I was over 6 feet tall at the time, and for you younger people, this was back before they invented 7-foot high school people. So I was considered tall. I also grew up in Indiana. Okay, Indiana loves basketball and has for a long time. I've heard it said, I think in jest, that the reason basketball wasn't invented in Indiana was that we were too busy practicing free throws at the time. Okay, has anyone ever seen the movie Hoosiers? Indiana was, now that's a little bit before my time, that's more like late 50s, early 60s. But Indiana was like that. They were passionate about basketball, particularly at the high school level. This is a picture of my high school's basketball team. This is actually during my junior year. You might notice I'm not in that picture. People who know me know that I like playing basketball now, but that was not the case when I was younger. Because you see, growing up, I was very introverted. Okay, sure, I played backyard football with my siblings and friends, but I was awkward socially more than athletically, and really much more interested in academics than sports. And although I enjoy basketball now, and I'm not too bad at it, I am grateful that my parents didn't push me into hoops then. Okay, you might be thinking, well, maybe his parents weren't sports enthusiasts. Maybe they didn't care about basketball, so of course they wouldn't push him. Let me tell you about my dad. Okay, earlier, that was an older picture, a picture when Dad was older. This is my dad. Well, he's younger than I am now. Okay, Dad was all about sports, and he was especially about basketball. Dad played ball on the high school and college level. And not only that, some of you might identify this, Dad was the kind of person who knew everybody and whom everyone knew. And people knew about him and basketball. So occasionally I'd hear something like, "You don't play ball, but you're tall, and you're Bill Frohliger's kid." I got the impression that some people thought my height was being wasted. Well, I heard that quite a bit, so I'm sure Dad heard it too. But if he did, it never got back to me. He never said anything to indicate he was disappointed in my not playing basketball, even though, as you might have noticed, he was the head basketball coach. That's my dad. Now, this might not seem like a big thing, but it is to me. I have always been impressed that Dad never forced any of his kids into sports, even though sports was a huge part of his life. And so I figure if he could support us in whatever decision we chose, I should be able to do the same thing with students, friends, and family. All right, one last math fact. Say you make a ham sandwich, and you do it with ham, bread, and cheese. Then there is a mathematical theorem, and it is called the ham sandwich theorem. Well, okay, it's an application of something called the Borsuk-Ulam theorem, and no one's going to remember Borsuk-Ulam, so ham sandwich. That says with one clean slice, not this, one clean slice, somewhere you can split that so that the bread is split in half, the ham is split in half, and the cheese is split in half. Okay, those who are going to get picky and say, well, what if there are an odd number of atoms, you can't split those in half, you can leave. But if you assume everything is a kind of spread that something can be split in half, then you can do that. Oh, by the way, the theorem, like the thing with Chicago, it doesn't tell you how to do it. It just tells you that the cut is there. And so now I've come to the end of my talk. I hope you found the mathematical diversions to be interesting, or at least not too painful, and no, there won't be a quiz. I also hope that maybe you've picked up some useful tidbits from my reflections about the impressions we form as well as those we give, and about not being afraid to challenge people while supporting them as they find their own way. And I guess if I'm to leave you with any advice, it would be to be observant as you go through life. Look at what's going on around you and notice the people you meet. Who knows? You might just learn something when, Thank you.